What happens when a black engineer decides to jam a Japanese signal without orders? He was isolated, ridiculed, and only then did they realize that he had saved the entire garrison. Let me tell you something right off the bat. You ever try to stop a train with a broomstick? That's what it felt like. You see the damn thing coming, no brakes, no whistle, and you know if it hits, people die. So you do the only thing you can. You get in the way. And guess what? The train still hits you. That's how my war started. Not with bullets. With a button. April 17th, 1943. Cold air cutting like a knife off the Bering Sea. Out there on one of those god-forsaken Aleutian islands, we weren't fighting men. We were fighting rust, frostbite, and radio silence. I was Lieutenant James McClure, Navy Signal Corps. A black man in uniform, yes, but more than that. I was a damn good engineer. Got my hands on radios when most folks still thought electricity was just lightning in a bottle. Designed a signal disruptor in my junior year at Howard. But in the Navy, that made me difficult. They didn't want smart. They wanted quiet. But that morning I saw something I couldn't unsee. The radar picked up a faint pulse. Not ours. Wrong frequency, wrong cadence, like a knock at the back door that ain't supposed to be used. I knew what it was. Japanese command chatter. Tight, encoded, but real, and dangerously close. Now here's where I did what no one else dared. I switched on my prototype jammer. Not protocol, not approved, not even legal, probably. But I knew, if they were coordinating an operation, we had minutes, not hours. So I jammed the hell out of that signal. Burned right through the band with a sweep of static that could have fried eggs if you were close enough. For the first time in that freezing, wet war, I felt like I did something right. And then the roof came down. McClure, what the hell did you just do? Captain Hurd, pink as pork and twice as salty, stormed into the comms shack like he owned the damn weather. I cut off a transmission from the enemy, sir, I said. Calm, firm, like a man who still thought logic mattered. You cut off our own line to Anchorage. Do you have any idea what you've just jammed? No, sir, but I have a damn good idea what I blocked. He got real close. You ever seen a man so angry his lips starts to tremble, but he doesn't want to show weakness? That's a dangerous kind of man. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. No trial, no hearing, just like that. They locked my lab, took my notes, even swapped the lock on my bunkroom like I was some kind of spy. All because I hit the switch before asking for permission. Funny how that works. You do what's right, not what's written, and suddenly you're the problem. That night I sat on the edge of my cot, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like motor oil and iron rations. Outside, wind moaned through the gaps in the walls like some ghost begging to be let in. I was watching the sky through the slit of a broken window and I saw it. A silhouette. Big, silent. A flying boat. One of theirs. Maybe a Kawanishi. Maybe something worse, just drifting past the stars like it owned the night. And I realized something. They weren't guessing. They were coordinating. That signal I blocked. That was no test run. And now they knew we weren't listening. You want to know the worst part? It wasn't that they stripped my rank, or that they tossed my ideas like yesterday's trash. It was that they knew I was right. But this Navy, this war, this world, it didn't run on truth, it ran on rank, on protocol, on the fragile pride of men too scared to admit someone beneath them might be above them in brains. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just sat there in the dark, listening to the wind carry secrets across the ice. And deep down I knew Something bad was coming, and we'd be too busy disciplining the man who warned us to even see it. We're just getting started. The moment McClure stood up for what was right, the system came down on him like a hammer. What happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about chain of command. Stick around. This story's just warming up. You ever sit in a room and feel it shrinking? Not because the walls are moving, no, but because the silence gets so tight you can't even hear yourself think. That was the barracks the morning after I got benched. 4 bunks, 1 busted stove, 1 cracked radio nobody dared to touch anymore, and me, sitting there like I was radioactive. Nobody said it out loud, but I saw it in their eyes. That's the guy who crossed the line. That's the guy who thought he was smarter than command. That's the guy who turned off the wrong radio. Not a single man asked what signal I picked up. Not one. And then came Private Brooks, kid from Detroit. Barely 20, but sharp. He walked in with a look like he'd just seen a ghost, holding a piece of torn field tape with scribbled coordinates. He passed it to Sergeant Ames, who grunted and said, "Wrong frequency." Brooks didn't let it go. "Sir, the echo's off, and it's not bouncing like our boy's code. Something's wrong." Ames waved him off. "Our guys have been off beat since Pearl. Let it be." I stood up, quietly, took that tape in my hand and traced it with my finger. The pulse was tight. Japanese. No question. "Where'd you pull this from?" I asked. Brooks looked around, hesitant. "Coastal relay. Someone turned off the filter. It slipped through." Of course it did, because I was no longer the one manning the filters. You want to know how bureaucracy covers its tracks? They bury you under paperwork while smiling to your face. They make sure you're still breathing, just not moving. By noon, I was reassigned to inventory duty, counting crates of expired rations in a storage tent that leaked like a drunk faucet. No more radio. No more access to tech. Just me, moldy boxes, and the growing suspicion that we were about to get blindsided while playing by rules written for last year's war. Every few minutes I'd stop and listen, to the wind, to the silence between the waves. Something was off. Too still, too clean. War don't stay quiet this long. That evening I tried speaking with Lieutenant Lewis. He was young, green, but not stupid. If anyone could see past the politics, it'd be him. "James," he said, pulling me aside, "you're lucky they didn't court-martial you." "Lucky," I shot back. "I cut a live signal from a moving target less than 30 nautical miles out. They should have given me a damn commendation." Lewis glanced over his shoulder. "You're not wrong. But this place, it doesn't reward right. It rewards quiet." There it was again. That word. Quiet. You know what else was quiet? The command tower the next morning. Not a single call came through. Not from Anchorage, not from Dutch Harbor. All our lines were clear. Suspiciously clear. Like someone had flipped the whole damn island to mute. I knew better. I knew what it meant. The frequency wasn't jammed. It was drowned. That afternoon the fog rolled in. The thick, heavy kind that sticks to your ribs. The kind you don't breathe. You chew. Visibility dropped to nothing. Radios crackled, but no voices followed. Just static. Just ghost noise. Command didn't blink. "Routine coastal weather," they said. "Normal for the Aleutians. Stay sharp and follow protocol." And there I was, standing in a sea of rules, holding on to a lifeboat made of gut instinct. I wasn't supposed to touch a radio again. That was part of my reassignment. But you leave a man alone in the back of a supply tent, and you better believe he's going to build something. Out of wire, Scrap metal, whatever he can find. So I built a receiver, crude but strong, tuned it to fringe frequencies, the ones the brass never bothered checking. And just before sunset, I heard them. Whispers, short bursts, long pauses. Not English, not even code we used, but clean, disciplined, precise. They were talking. They were close. I took the signal and ran, stormed right into Hurd's office, knocked over a map table by accident and slapped down my notes. "This is them," I said. "Same cadence I jammed yesterday. They're circling us like sharks." He didn't look at the paper, didn't even look at me. Just sat back in his chair and sighed like I was asking for a personal favor. "McClure, I told you yesterday, you don't have clearance." "This ain't about clearance, Captain. It's about lives. Protocol stands." He dismissed me, just like that. Like I was some overeager mechanic trying to explain how to fly the plane. As I stepped out, I heard him laugh, a low, polite chuckle with one of his aides. "Every man wants to be a hero, until the bullets start flying," he said. Well, that night the bullets didn't fly, but something did, and it wasn't ours. You thought the tension couldn't rise any higher? You were wrong. What McClure discovers next doesn't just shake the base, it shakes the whole damn chain of command. This is the moment. The next chapter isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Stay locked in, because you're about to see what happens when the system looks the other way, and someone looks back. This story is just beginning. When a single radio signal can change the course of an entire operation, is it worth keeping quiet? If you feel that such forgotten episodes of war are important, subscribe so you don't miss the next twist. And in the comments write, what would you do in James McClure's place? You know that feeling when you're sitting in a room and everyone else is smiling, like it's a Sunday picnic, and you're the only one smelling smoke? Yeah, that was me. Third day after the signal, third day after the flyover, and nobody was doing a damn thing about it. Except me. And that's when everything finally snapped. It started before dawn. The fog was so thick, you could barely see your boots. The air had that heavy stillness, like the world was holding its breath. I was out near the relay towers, pretending to do inventory on busted antennae. But really, I was tuning my scrap-built receiver. There it was again. Same frequency, same pattern. But this time there was more. Chatter, not just coordinates. Commands, movement. Package secure. Window 2 hours. Maintain silence. They weren't scouting anymore. They were setting up. I dropped the headset. My fingers were shaking, not from fear but from rage. Not at them, at us. Because while the enemy was moving like a wolf pack, we were out here arguing over meal schedules and which tent got a new coffee pot. I stormed into the ops tent. Captain Hurd was there, naturally, flanked by his usual echo chamber. Clipboard officers who never touched a wire but sure knew how to sign off on one. "Sir," I said, "I need 5 minutes." He didn't look up. "You've had enough minutes this week, McClure." I picked up chatter again. "They're planning something. Immediate. We've got—" He cut me off. "We are not changing protocol every time you hear static." "It's not static. It's orders. Targeted movement." He sighed. The dramatic kind, like I was a child asking why the sky's blue. "You are not cleared for intelligence interpretation. That's final." I just stood there, looking him dead in the eye. And then I did the one thing you're never supposed to do in uniform. I disobeyed. By noon, I had pulled together 2 of the only men who halfway believed me. Brooks, the kid from Detroit, and Jenkins, a comms tech from Georgia with hands steadier than a surgeon. We took the backup relay tower. Power line was busted, but we jury-rigged a gas generator, hooked the receiver to the high band, and started recording. The chatter was thicker now. Japanese, 2 voices, clear as daylight. They were triangulating, using our own dead zones as cover. Smart. Real smart. Then the static shifted, and I heard something I wasn't supposed to. Hold transmission. Enemy relay confirmed active. They knew. They were listening too. Jenkins looked up from the dials. We just lit a flare in a dark forest, man. And right then, the lights in the shack flickered. Once, then again, then gone. The generator didn't fail. We got cut. 3 men, 1 busted tower, a recorder full of proof. And now, officially off the grid, I ran straight to Lewis, told him everything, showed him the tape, the coordinates, the timestamps. He believed me. But he also knew what it meant. To report it would be to admit that we ran rogue. To move on, it would mean challenging direct orders. This is career-ending stuff, James, he said quietly. I nodded. Not if it ends someone else's career first. Lewis made the call, unofficially. He rerouted a scouting patrol to the coastal bend where one of the signals had pinged. Low and slow, no alarms. What they found wasn't theoretical. Buried in the ice was a cache, half covered by snow, camouflaged with brush, spare fuel, radio packs, waterproof crates, Japanese markings. It wasn't a theory anymore. But guess what? Even with that, even with physical evidence, Command still refused to raise alert. Why? Because they didn't authorize the patrol, because the report came from someone previously reprimanded. Because admitting I was right meant admitting they were wrong. And in war, pride kills more men than bullets. By the time the day ended, we were deeper in the dark than ever. Orders came down. No mention of the cache. No changes to routine. Everyone to maintain discipline and focus. So we sat there, knowing, waiting, watching the fog roll in again like a curtain on a stage no one wanted to see open. You felt that, didn't you? This was the break. The moment truth met system, and the system blinked. What comes next will not be protocol. Stay with us. Because the next chapter, it is not just a story. It is a confrontation. You ever try to stay quiet when everything in your gut's screaming? Yeah, that was me. 4th day in. Fog still clinging to the ground like it owned the place. The base still acting like it was Tuesday. Like we weren't sitting on a ticking situation while folks played cards and filed reports like nothing was wrong. Let me tell you something about war. It's not always about the bullets. Sometimes the real battle's between what you see and what they let you say. After the cache was found and brushed aside like it was an old tin can, I realized something dangerous. It wasn't just ignorance anymore. It was preservation. These men weren't blind. They were afraid of looking, because looking meant acting, and acting meant risk. Not on the field, on the resume. Hurd doubled down, ordered tighter comms, locked the generator shed, reassigned Jenkins to latrine inspection. Punishment dressed up as paperwork. Even Brooks got moved to night watch, out on the cliffside where nothing ever happens. Lewis? He kept his mouth shut, but I saw it in his eyes. Regret has a shape. It hangs off a man's shoulders like a coat he can't take off. Midday came with news that chilled me more than the weather. All external transmissions from our base were now under review, which meant scrubbed, filtered, blocked. They were boxing us in from the inside. So I did what any man would do when the walls start closing in. I made a hole. There was a backup relay tower the brass forgot about because it didn't work. Wasn't on the current grid. Power lines half rotted. Snow piled waist-high around it. I knew about it because I helped install it a year prior during a storm drill. No one cared then. No one remembered now. I dug my way in by hand, fingers frozen, chest heaving, and in that silence under gray metal and frostbite air, I powered up what little was left of its bones. Got it running. Old, dusty vacuum tubes came alive like they'd missed the noise. Static at first, then signal, raw, unfiltered signal. What came through next? It wasn't a Japanese voice. It was ours. Garbled, emergency-coded. A patrol boat somewhere east, transmitting distress. Their message was broken, but the tone was clear. Hostile engagement. Small arms, shoreline movement. They were under fire, and they were close. I ran the tape to Lewis, straight to him. This was just recorded. Not even 10 minutes ago. I told him. He paled. Where is this coming from? I pointed to the old tower on the edge of nowhere. They're not scanning that band anymore, I said. It's off-grid. He stood silent, hands clenched behind his back. Mind racing. Then he asked the one question I'd been waiting days to hear. What do we do? You see, when a good man's been quiet too long, the switch isn't slow. It flips. We took the tape to the radio room. This time Lewis didn't whisper. He barked. Patch me through to Coastal Command. Priority line. Technicians froze. You could feel the air shift. I said now. A moment later, the line buzzed. Someone from Dutch Harbor came on. Lewis didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He just played the tape. You could hear their breathing on the other end. Then a voice. Repeat that. You said live distress signal. Yes, Lewis said. And we're sending a patrol. With or without approval. Command tried to stall. Sent back a stand by for confirmation. But we didn't. Lewis signed off, handed me the notepad and said, Get your team. You've got 90 minutes. We didn't have much. Just an old Jeep with bald tires, 2 short-range radios, and a crate of supplies that expired back when jazz was still scandalous. But we had names, faces, men who still believed doing right was worth doing, even if it meant stepping on rank. Brooks was in. Jenkins found his way back. Even old Sergeant Ames, the same guy who brushed Brooks off 2 chapters ago. He showed up with a rifle and said, You're not doing this alone. Funny how crisis clears a man's vision. The road was slick. Snow falling harder now. Visibility low. But the radio static was gone, replaced by soft pulses. Repeating. Closer now. And then we saw it. Smoke. Low, black, curling through the trees like a snake. The patrol boat had crashed, half up the shore, riddled with holes. 2 men were still inside, one waving frantically, one not moving. We pulled them out. Gunfire echoed from the tree line just once. Warning shot or straggler we couldn't tell, but we were exposed. Sitting ducks, no backup. And still, no order to retrieve, no reinforcements. Nothing. Because, officially, we weren't out there. Back at base, we brought in the wounded. Quietly. No parade. No welcome. Lewis filed the report, marked unauthorized field recovery. Hurd reviewed it. Stamped it. Filed it away. Not a word. Not even a thank you. But that night, as I walked past the mess hall, I caught Lewis on the porch. Alone. Smoking. Hands shaking. You know what they'll do, I said. He nodded. Maybe, he answered. But I also know what we just did. We stood there for a while. 2 men, no medals, no applause, just silence, and the weight of what silence can cost. You feel that pressure building? That was not a mission. That was a line being crossed. Next up, you'll see what happens when truth can't be ignored any longer, even by those trained to bury it. Stick with it. This war's not over, not even close. You ever look a man in the eye and see it hit him? That moment he realizes everything he stood behind just cracked. That's what I saw on Captain Hurd's face the morning after we brought those boys back. He didn't shout. He didn't scold. He just stared like the ground had moved under his boots and nobody warned him. And maybe that was the first honest thing I'd seen in him. But let's rewind a bit, because truth doesn't just land. It arrives step by step, like boots in the snow. It started with a knock. Not mine. I wasn't allowed near the main office anymore. This one came from upstairs, Dutch Harbor, headquarters. They'd picked up fragments of our recording, thanks to Lewis's quiet little transmission, and they weren't happy. Not about the recording, but about not being told. 2 officers flew in. No names, no smiles. The kind of men who spoke in flat voices and carried files thicker than blankets. They didn't ask what happened. They told us what didn't. There was no confirmed attack, one said. There was no active enemy presence in the area. And any internal unauthorized mobilization will be reviewed for disciplinary action. The words came easy, like they'd been rehearsed. I watched Lewis listen to that speech like someone being handed a glass of water that was already cracked. He didn't fight back. Not there, but later outside the barracks he muttered under his breath. We saved 2 lives, and they want us to sign a form saying it didn't happen. That's when I knew. He was done being part of the wallpaper. Now, you'd think after something like that, they'd start locking down tighter. And you'd be right. All patrols suspended unless explicitly approved. All outgoing messages double-checked. My backup tower? Disassembled. Gone. They were burying it all, again. But here's the thing. Once a truth gets out, it don't go back in the box. People had seen the smoke, seen the blood, seen the boat. You can erase logs, you can burn reports, but you can't unsee real life. Brooks told the kitchen boys. Jenkins talked to the mechanics. Within 48 hours, the whole base knew something had happened, and it wasn't on the books. And that's when the real shift started. Not loud, not organized, just different. Orders were followed, but slower. Questions were asked that weren't asked before. Why are we checking that relay twice? Did you say we're ignoring a signal? What happened out at the bend? Rumors became questions. Questions became doubt. And that scares command more than enemies do. So they pushed back. Hurd issued a memo, refocus on discipline. Then another. Unauthorized discussion of operations will be treated as insubordination. And then they moved Lewis. Gone. Just like that. Quiet order. Flown out the next morning. No ceremony. No word. He left me a note, though. Folded in a ration wrapper, stuffed under my cot. All it said was, "Some signals don't need a radio. Keep pushing." I kept pushing. Not with machines this time. With people. I pulled Brooks, Jenkins, and a few others into what we called drill reviews. Unofficial talks about signal patterns, terrain blind spots, and how to hear more than what's said. We didn't break orders. We just bent 'em toward the truth. And the truth kept showing up. Every few nights a signal would flicker, weak, maybe from the sea, maybe from shore. We tracked each one, mapped them. One night we found a pattern. It wasn't random. It was a route. A supply drop, not ours. I knew we couldn't stop it. Not with 3 men and a broken jeep. But we could prove it. We recorded it, timed it, marked it, and this time, I walked into Hurd's office myself. No folder, no salute, just the tape. I'm not here to win, I told him. I'm here to stop you from losing more. He didn't stand, didn't move. He just looked down at the desk. Not like he was thinking, like he was tired of not thinking. And for the first time, I saw it. The man was tired of being wrong and pretending he wasn't. 2 days later, an encrypted request went out. Not from our base officially, but through our line, buried in logistics codes. The next week, a new set of officers arrived. They didn't ask. They acted, scouted the blind zones, pulled logs, quietly replaced 2 men in comms. Nobody said the word investigation, but everyone knew. And just like that, we were no longer invisible. Hurd didn't speak to me after that, not even a nod. But he started listening more. He left the old frequency reports on my bunk. He let Brooks back into comms. He let Jenkins fix the tower. He didn't need to say thank you. That's not how war works. But he stopped getting in the way. Sometimes that's louder than praise, and that's how change started. Not with medals, not with a speech, but with a signal. A silence broken, a decision made not once but again and again, by men who remembered that duty isn't about rules, it's about responsibility. You're still here. Good. Because the final chapter, that one's about what they did after we were heard. And let me tell you, they weren't ready. If you've ever watched a man sit across from you and realize he's been wrong for days, weeks, maybe his whole career, then you know the look I saw on Hurd's face that morning. Not guilt, not shame, just heavy. Like he'd been carrying the wrong weight all this time, and only now figured out why it hurt. But this ain't about redemption. This is about what comes next. When a system finally listens to the very voice it tried to bury. It started with a report. Quiet. Official. Stamped with some code nobody in our shack had clearance to read. All I knew was it had a red strip across the top and showed up in a locked briefcase hand-delivered by a courier who didn't even take off his gloves. That's when things shifted. And I mean fast. New patrol orders were drawn. Radar sweeps expanded. A full sweep team flew in under cover of a routine supply drop. But none of it made the newsletter. None of it reached the bulletin board. This wasn't protocol, this was cleanup. Quiet, sharp, and off the record. But the static didn't lie. That next week, we caught another burst. Signal came in cleaner this time. Japanese carrier frequency. Short pulses, then silence. Jenkins caught it first. "That's movement," he said. "They're testing again." This time, Hurd didn't hesitate. He pulled us into a closed room. Map spread across the table, finger tapping over a remote inlet we'd flagged weeks before. "What do you see?" he asked. We laid it out. Coordinates, patterns, drops, the works. Jenkins ran the recording. I pulled up the decoded timestamps. Brooks showed the weather overlays. And Hurd, he just listened. He wasn't trying to prove us wrong. He was trying not to waste any more time. That same night, an unmarked team rolled out. Fast. No questions asked. Word came back next morning. Contact confirmed. Enemy float plane found abandoned. Communications gear stripped. But the camp still warm. They'd been there. They were still out there. Now the base was humming. Not with panic, with motion, real motion. And for the first time since I landed on that slab of ice months ago, I saw something I didn't think I'd see again. Respect. Not the handshaking kind, not speeches and smiles, just nods, quiet glances, men adjusting their work because they trusted the man giving the frequency report. Me. That week, Hurd submitted a formal commendation. For me, for Brooks, for Jenkins. Said we demonstrated exceptional initiative in operational signal analysis under uncertain conditions. That's the military way of saying they didn't listen, but you were right anyway. They couldn't promote me. Too much red tape, too many quiet mistakes to cover. But they couldn't ignore me anymore either. So they did the next best thing. They handed me a new assignment. Liaison Officer for Remote Signal Coordination. Fancy title. What it meant? I got to listen again, and this time they wanted to hear what I found. Now look, I ain't telling this story for glory. I'm telling it because this stuff happens. Still, good people with good ideas get shut down because the system's too proud to admit it doesn't know everything. But static don't lie, and sometimes the only way through the noise is to keep transmitting. So here's to the ones who kept tuning in, even when no one believed the signal was real. Here's to the ones who didn't wait for permission to do the right thing. And here's to the truth. Because you can jam a radio, you can bury a report, but you can't silence a man who refuses to stop listening. That man, he might just save the whole damn base. And that's the end of this story, but not the end of the fight, because every war has noise but truth. Truth cuts through. Thanks for sticking with it. If you felt that, if you heard the pulse in this tale, then maybe it's time your voice got heard too. Drop a comment. Share what this brought up for you. And if you believe stories like this matter, hit subscribe. We're just getting started.